Hello, hello. So quiet.
Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome to today's panel. I'm super excited about this, but I'm more excited about the people on the panel. You're going to meet and hear from some extraordinary people today who are really changing the game. They're changing the format. They're changing the way that documentaries are made, seen, and how they're leaning into being, of a new generation. And I'm going to talk about that a little in a moment. But again, one of the key driving words that are coming out of this is authenticity. And it keeps coming up a lot when it comes around content with even Gen A, Gen Z, lower millennials. They're watching things that resonate with them, that they can lean into, and they can say, I see this. And so today, we're going to show some of the documentaries from this talented crew. But I just want to give you a little bit of some stats. And I'm not a stat guy, but this is really interesting for this panel. So documentaries have become extremely popular in the last decade. We've all seen that, and more so during COVID. But what we saw through COVID was younger generations leaning into documentaries. And they've not been finding them on NBC or History Channel or Discovery. They've been finding them on YouTube and other platforms, and specifically the streamers, who are really have upped their game in sort of investing into documentaries and new forms of storytelling. 70% are watching documentaries a few times a month, and that is the age group of 14 to 26. 25% of them are watching one documentary at least once a week. 65% of the respondents watch documentaries on SVOD platforms. Broadcast television has the least viewership within this audience, less than 5% between them, and skews much older. 78% of 19 to 35-year-olds are consuming documentary content on SVOD platforms. Age is making a difference to how documentaries are being made today. So with that, I just want to now lean in and begin this panel. So I'm Jamie Eldon. I'm the Global Chief Revenue Officer of Shutterstock, and I'm here with an amazing team who are going to introduce themselves and talk about what they're up to and what this means to them in their day-to-day and in their industry. Now, we've gone over the stats, we've gone over the growth, and we're really starting to see some interesting documentaries come onto our screens. So, without further ado, all of this comes from a company called Shutterstock. So, Shutterstock, most of you are aware, we were known as, maybe 5 years ago, as a stock company. You'd come to Shutterstock for an image, a piece of footage, some motion, some special effects, maybe to help you with your documentary or your filmmaking or a TV commercial. And over the last few years, we've really started to transform ourselves and pivot into a more modern type of a creative solutions company. Today, we partner exclusively globally with Condé Nast, A&E, Time Life, and many other valuable partnerships where we represent their archive and content on a daily basis, licensing it to this industry. And for us, it's enabled us to open up new ways to tell stories, and we're able to work with traditional publishers and owners of these archives who've really struggled over the last few years to figure out, what do we do with this? How can we tell stories from what we have to a new generation? Well, we feel that we're unlocking this, and this talent is certainly unlocking it today. So I'm going to hand over to the gentleman on the end here, Aidan Darnay. Aidan joined Shutterstock shortly after I came on board, and I was looking for somebody to come on, build a studio, weave all of this together. I knew something was happening in the landscape. I knew all of this content was available and nothing was happening with it, but I also knew there was a massive audience out there looking to consume something new and delivered in a new way. So I grabbed him from Vice, and here he is. So he's been with us for just over 2 years, and it's Aidan Darnay, who's the global head of production for Shutterstock Studios. Aidan.
Amazing, thank you. Thank you, Jamie. You really stepped on my toes a little bit with what I was going to say, but that's all good. So yeah, I joined 2 years ago, global head of Shutterstock Studios. We primarily make branded content, branded entertainment, commercial content for brands, agencies, and media companies. But about a year ago, we saw a major opportunity to launch an original programming's department and offering. And it kind of made complete sense. We have, as Jamie said, firstly, just the biggest archive at our disposal. And so as creators and producers, to have that in-house, to go source through material, that's a bit of a dream. We have global production. We shoot everywhere. We've got eyes and ears everywhere. And we have, thirdly, that kind of sounds weird. Not freaky, weird, but
I think that was
we're watching you. No, we're not. And then lastly, we have, that's funny, a top network of creators and producers. So the archive, the global production, and this amazing network has allowed us to really lean in and start making what we think is quite unique. And I'm really excited to share some of the films that we have. We've got 3 or 4 that we're going to be sharing today. And as Jamie said, I was SVP of production at Vice Media, where Keenan and Dan and John, the 4 of us worked together for a long time there, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later on. But the word authenticity, I think, is going to be something, of course, that we're going to be talking about today. And I think we're going to be talking about how we've been able to harness that for all the documentaries that we're making, but also the branded entertainment stuff that we're making, which is typically really hard to do. But with that, Jamie, back to you, buddy.
Okay, so let's get in here. Let's have the cast introduce themselves because they're an awesome cast. So here we are. First of all, to my left is Miles Diggs, or AKA Diggsy. And Diggsy, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Miles Diggs, but I'm commonly known as Diggsy. I've been a celebrity photographer for just over 10 years now, and I've photographed nearly anyone you can name, from your A-list actors to your favorite musicians, models, and reality stars. I would say that I capture candid moments on the streets of New York, LA, and around the world, while bringing a bit more class to an industry which gets a pretty negative reputation. I do cover breaking news, but I prefer to collaborate with my subjects, and I tell stories and, showcase fashion in a beautiful and artistic manner. Just this past year, I photographed Rihanna's pregnancy reveal in Harlem, New York. As she debuted her bare baby bump to the world.
Broke the internet. Broke it.
Yep, absolutely broke the internet. I've been extremely lucky to grow some close friendships with the people I've worked with over the years. And simply by being respectful and treating them with kindness, and just like human beings like the rest of us. Money Shot, which will be my on-screen debut, will kind of lift the curtains on the paparazzi industry as a whole, but also show how I choose to differentiate myself from the pack, allowing stars to feel comfortable in front of my lens.
Thank you, Miles. Okay, and next over here, Keenan.
Hi, my name is Keenan. I'm a filmmaker and artist. Right now, I'm working on a film called Donna. It's an autobiographical story about me looking for my birth mother. It's a little bit weird and pushes format in the sense that I end up meeting myself dressed as my birth mother. So, yeah, I'll get a little bit more into the details of it, but I'm very excited to be here and talk about how inspired I've been to push format and collaborate with some of these people here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Keenan. And now it is Dan, or Denim Dan, as I called him today. But Dan.
I am also wearing denim.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I just dress like Aiden every day, so...
You look great.
Yeah, I saw what he was doing, and then here I am. But I'm a documentary director and commercial director. I've done most of my work in sports, and I really get inspired by telling stories that kind of transcend sports and go into culture. So the reason that I'm up here today with John, who's my partner on our project, is we're making a TV show called We Are King about a high school soccer dynasty in New York City made up of primarily immigrant and first-generation kids with a coach who's like a pretty incredible character for a number of reasons, but he's a 75-year-old New York old Jewish man, recovering heroin addict who will literally tell you whatever he's thinking at any given moment. So it's been a heck of a ride. And yeah, that's really excited about this project that Shutterstock has come on to produce.
And then thank you. And then next to him in the wonderful mustard top, where we have John.
Thank you. I didn't wear denim because I didn't get the memo, but next time. John Weidman, Dan's partner, co-creator of We Are King. everything he said about the coach is true. If you've seen Uncut Gems, then you'll like our story for many other reasons as well. But yeah, I am a filmmaker. I've been the head of content in-house as well at a music platform called United Masters, at an ad agency called Translation, and had the privilege of working, as Aiden mentioned, with Aiden, Dan, Keenan at Vice, and fell in love with finding stories that deserve to be told at a higher level and elevated to bigger audiences, and that's really what my focus is. And last thing I'll say is I'm a New York native myself as well, and so working on We Are King with Dan has been really exciting because we really believe this is the next great quintessential New York story to come out, and we're very excited to talk more about it today.
Wonderful. So we're going to jump straight into it because, again, from my opening and what these guys have talked about, and I think you're gathering, there's a change in how things are being made, and that's literally leaning into consumer habits and how they want to consume it and how they want to see it. So a lot goes into it. It's not just diversity, it's lots of things. It's format, it's, telling the story, making sure that the narrative resonates and is authentic. So we're going to kick off and we're going to show a quick sort of trailer of our first one, which is called Reinventing the Wheel, which was a partnership with Carvana, and it's telling the story of Jimmy Johnson, the NASCAR driver, moving to IndyCar. I got it right.
I was right. That was good.
Yes.
Done it, man. Done it. So we'll just roll that clip. Thanks.
With Jimmy Johnson, exit of turn 7.
Watch the left-hand side there. It's an important lesson for Jimmy Johnson.
I ended the year where I thought I would have started it. There were many uncomfortable moments.
People were judging his performance, and they can kiss my ass because they don't know.
To have such a strong team around me that believe in me, I don't take that lightly.
This guy wants to do it, and I know he's got the work ethic for it. Just can't wait to get this season going.
This year's different. Not only am I going to drive the street races, but also the ovals.
Making the Indy 500 is huge. That's going to be extremely difficult.
Jimmy's the same guy today as he was when he was 4 years old on the track. That feeling of wanting to go fast and wanting to win, it doesn't leave.
In my head, it's always been about racing. It's been about the experience. And I really do just love to drive.
So I'm going to hand over to Aiden, who's just going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just to touch on that. So really one of those, and Dan directed it, so I want him to chime in as well, but one of those rare projects that's made by a brand but doesn't feel branded in any way. I'm so proud of it. It's actually been picked up by NBC Sports and is also airing on Sky as well. And like the true approach, again, I don't want to step on Dan's toes, but the approach that we took was the same way that we'd take with any other type of documentary. We go in as far and as deep as possible in terms of the background, the storytelling. The team were on vacation with him. They went everywhere with the family, going deep into his archives and getting as rich of a story as possible. And what's come out has just been this amazing show. And what started with a conversation with Carvana, where they said, we'd done a couple of other things for them. And they said, we've got a project with Jimmy Johnson. We're sponsoring him. He's moving from NASCAR to IndyCar, which within the racing community was as big as MJ going from baseball to basketball. He's a very, very, very famous racing car driver. And we got full access, and the relationship that Dan managed to create with him obviously shows on screen. And yeah, we were so proud of it. But Dan, do you want to give a little bit of overview as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think one important thing was that, and I've got some branded doc homies in the back, but I do think that brands don't have to be a dirty word if they don't inject themselves in the project in a way that, instantly makes people shudder. I think that there's ways to do it. Carvana is sponsoring his car. They're all over his car. They're all over his branding. So we don't really have to go too deep into them as a brand. Like, we can just tell this story of this man who's, kind of doing something where he's super vulnerable. He's been on top of his career for his entire life. And now he knows he's going to get absolutely trashed for being horrible at something new. But he just wants to do it because that's his dream. And I think that's relatable. And I think that's where sports stories get good. When you break down, we can build people up as heroes as much as we want, but when you show people as vulnerable as human beings, that's when sports stories get good. And that was an opportunity that a lot of brands are shy about, but Carvana they were incredible partners in allowing us kind of to tell that story.
And Dan also launched and ran Vice World of Sports at Vice for a long time. And one thing that we did consistently at Vice at that point was not always just shining the light on the winner, but also actually going to check out the stories of the losers, because sometimes their stories are even more rich and more interesting and compelling. Looking at the counter story, the opposite story, off the beaten track kind of approach to what the story really could be. So obviously that type of storytelling and richness from Vice being a product, the four of us, from that type of storytelling approach, and then putting in a top athlete was an amazing combination, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think that, it goes back to what we were talking about with looking at what young audiences want and what they go for. And if you look at what, Gen Z cares so much less about who's winning, who's losing. They care about who's interesting. They care about who has a great story. And so tapping into that is just natural. Like, it's just the way that storytelling has to go. It has to go that way in sports. It has to go that way everywhere. And that's, I think, just like at the heart of everything that we do.
Yeah, amazing.
That's wonderful. And it's on NBC at the end of the year, and if you're in Europe, it's on Sky. So moving forward, we're going to now take a quick look at We Are King. Okay, so we can just line that one up.
This kid just came to Ivory Coast. He contacted me. He needs a school. And I got an app on my phone that says French to English, English to French, and he can understand me. He's learning his French so he can tell him to step up, away, certain terms.
For Cabo into the stands, that's the only thing. I want to make him feel part of the team.
Pass the ball. Pass the ball.
C'est difficile d'être loin de la famille et tes frères. Voir des gens, toi-même tu veux t'exprimer, mais tu n'arrives pas. C'est pas facile. Mais au fil de la musique, ça grandit. Je pense que ça va aller.
He be pulling his phone randomly out to me. He be telling me stuff in French. That shit is fucking cool.
Kick the ball up.
Lancer el ballon. Lancer el ballon.
Yeah! It was good, man. This is good, man.
Yeah, retourne. Diva.
So they'll talk about it, but I watched a 7-minute piece of this, and I kid you not, I showed it to the board of Shutterstock, and tears were coming down. This is a story that is incredible. So let's chat about it.
Yeah, this is a story that you kind of have to see to believe, but it's also a story that could easily be overlooked because it is taking place at a very underfunded public school in New York City. It's a story about athletes going through coming-of-age experiences that are extremely relatable, but not sensational necessarily, which is where a lot of sports documentaries, storytelling really looks to go. And so for us, this all started with just finding a story that was almost too good to be true, and then getting the access that we needed in order to tell it only with truth. And it's been a joy to kind of just really get to know the coach, get to know the kids, get to know their families, and really just show their real lives and how their lives intertwine, and how being a part of this soccer team is transformative for them and their families, and to just provide a platform for that story to be told in its most authentic way possible. So when you have a story this good, you don't have to twist it, you don't have to embellish it, you just have to tell it right. And that's, I think, what we've done with We Are King.
And I think there's something too, even like in that clip where you see Raymond, the goalkeeper, is, first off, it's a Honduran kid for the Bronx who's learning French to communicate with his teammate from Cote d'Ivoire. It's like, it's an insane and incredible story, but it's also what happens in New York City every single day. And I think there's beauty in that too, of this is incredible and this kind of genuine notion of what the world should be, but it's also so natural to a 15, 16, 17-year-old. And I think that was really inspirational. And also just letting them actually talk the way that they want to talk, communicate the way that they want to communicate. So, if Raymond's cursing on camera, there's instantly places that we can't necessarily put a 17-year-old cursing on camera, but that's who he is. That's how he talks. That's how he wants to communicate. So not kind of cutting that off is a way for us to make sure that the story feels real and is something that I think makes it just so much more worth watching.
But they're also like the best soccer team in the country. One of the best soccer teams. Like that's the crazy part as well. Is this story is about these amazing kids coming together, barely being able to speak the same language, with this amazing coach who's the school system hates. He's a radical. He's kind of radical personality. But yet their team plays incredibly well.
It's unbelievable. I mean, so we captured them. I'm going to spoil a little bit of the story, but you should still watch it. But they just won their 20th city championship in the past 25 years. And that is a level of success that no other sports team that we have found, at least anywhere in the world, has achieved. When then you look at the challenges that these kids go through, learning each other's languages, coming from these immigrant and first-generation families, and that this man is able to kind of stitch this all together into something truly unprecedented. It's almost a story. It's almost too good to be true. So just allowing the story to unfold authentically was really the biggest challenge for us versus having to try to convince the viewer that what they're watching is special. It just is special. It's unprecedented.
It really is. So now we're just going to move on to our next clip, which is from Keenan, which is her documentary, Donna.
Birth mother's first name, Donna. Ruddy complexion. Color of eyes blue, hair red, brown.
What year was she born? Birth mother has gone to great lengths to keep her pregnancy unknown to everyone, including family, friends, and work colleagues. She did not tell him, did not tell her dad, did not tell most people.
I don't know, it feels like an experiment. I tried to do it by myself when I was in Toronto, and it didn't go very well.
Which part? Like
transforming myself into my birth mother to interview myself. It was like a cathartic exercise.
Yeah.
That didn't work well in Toronto at all.
So family medical history. Birth mother's mother has hay fever?
Okay.
What's that? I guess I didn't realize that the way this document was presented was not how your mom spoke about herself, but these concise explanations of how a social worker understood her. And I'm so curious about how much time the social worker would have spent with her to be able to make a statement although often confident, she frequently needs reassurance. How long do you have to know somebody to feel that?
But then that could be her?
Oh yeah, that was one on the left.
But is that her?
Yeah, I could look like that person, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, maybe.
Who is this? Oh, that's not her.
You're the shape of your smile, maybe?
My nose, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Hi, Donna. I'm Anne, I'm the producer.
Oh, nice to meet you. Hi.
Yeah. Keenan? Keenan?
Is that her?
Okay, you ready? Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. It's obviously a very personal story. And the reason I'm choosing to tell it in this way that's blurring the format between documentary and mockumentary is that I kind of realized growing up that my entire personal history was based off of the truths that people who love me a lot are telling me. And I think that this is something that is true for a lot of parents. They tell us things in a certain way to keep us safe. And but when you're adopted and when you're transracially adopted, I believe that it elevates the level of intensity, to a whole new place. So for me, I decided to sort of take a Nancy Drew approach and start knocking on hollow walls and looking for secret compartments and dusting for fingerprints. And I came up with this sort of way of experimenting with if everyone else can invent who my birth mother is, then I can invent who she is. And coming to terms with the fact that there are multiple versions of reality that we can accept and negotiate in our lives. So I feel like that sort of explains my process. I could probably talk about it for a long time, but I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
And last but not least, we're going to now show a clip from the documentary on Diggsy here, which is called Money Shot.
People have a lot of misconceptions about celebrity photographers in general. As time has evolved, we've come much further than the early 2000s, 90s, where they're up in your face, shouting and screaming terrible things at people.
Stop, he's posing!
Breaking all sorts of laws to get the money shot. I at least hope to continue to develop it in a way that people are working in a symbiotic relationship with the celebrities at the same time.
It's amazing.
Thank you. So that was just a quick preview of what we've got going on. Being the black sheep is something that I've kind of grown accustomed to. Unlike the majority of this industry, I don't treat this as a 9-to-5. You have to be willing to eat, breathe, and fully invest yourself in the profession to be the best. I think that sometimes it's hard for the average person to fully grasp why someone would get into this profession. Yes, there's a great chance to make money. Yes, you're rubbing elbows with all the A-listers, but to me, it's more than that. I want people to see Money Shot and understand why I love what I do and share in the excitement. To see what goes on behind the scenes is very important to me as someone who is known for their final result or end product. This project will allow viewers to think deeper about the level of work that it takes to achieve a result compared to the stereotypical portrayal.
Amazing. I've got a quick question for Miles. Is it strange, Miles, that you're becoming a celebrity through the process of shooting celebrities?
A little bit, yeah. I tend to, stay to myself, and even though I have a huge social media presence, it's not really about me that much. It's more about my work and sharing with my audience. So this is a big change, but I'm looking forward to it as well and seeing how I can use it to better what I do.
And some of the scenes we have, I know we didn't have time to share it, but some of the scenes is literally a stakeout, right? You're outside,
Yep.
which again sounds kind of creepy, but it's not creepy.
Full stakeout,
Yeah.
the whole 9 yards, but also while I'm working and collaborating with different artists to create great shots that tell awesome stories.
Okay, so we've seen a clip. We've seen a clip from each of these things, and truly, I've seen them all, and they are unbelievably groundbreaking in the way that they are put together, the format, and the way they're telling the story. And what I love about it most is it's the freedom of creativity and creation that these guys have had during this process. And I think we covered that on We Are King. Telling the story today has to be authentic and it has to be real. And today, the streamers have jumped onto it. You can say fuck on a streaming platform. You can't say fuck on the History Channel. So there's a big difference. And I think that, this generation is really, really driving that. So I just want to talk a little bit right now, because one other thing that's come out of this surge in documentary filmmaking and adoption is it's global. You can make something now on your phone, I'll put it on YouTube, and the whole world has access to it, okay? And one of the things that, that's opened up is, do you have to change the way you tell that story? How do you produce that? If you want to be making a documentary about, and you're based in New York, but you want to, make a documentary about something that you're passionate about in another country, how do you do that? Is it easier? Is it harder? Well, global production now in the documentary film space is exploding. And Aidan here is just going to talk a little bit about how we kind of put that together and how it works for him.
Yeah, on the global front, it is an interesting time. Like we think that through TikTok and obviously other massive social media platforms, it's the easiest time that we've ever had to find stories and characters and amazing moments. And obviously we can do that quite easily globally through those social media platforms. And we've set up global production all over so that we can go and move into these stories and develop them quite quickly. it's the speed within which we're able to do that velocity, because typically when you're talking about developing a show, a format with any one of the streamers or any one of the networks that are looking to pick up a documentary, it's going to take a long time. But what we do is trying to move very swiftly to find and seek out what could be a really interesting story and react to what's viral, react to what people are talking about and what's trending, and then put together something by way of materials, pitch materials, and go and talk to some of the partners that we have. And it's really that velocity that we've been able to make in quite a short space of time, in a year. 4 documentaries, a couple of others that we have in the works as well. One that we can't talk about that's been picked up. So it's really, again, with the unique nature of setting up a studio within Shutterstock, that global production, access to inspiring archive, access to amazing directors and producers has enabled us to be able to move, I think, quite a lot quicker than most people. So. And also with Miles, looking inwardly, like Shutterstock, if you think about it, we've contributed to filmmakers and producers and studios in their films for 20 years since we started, through the content that we have. So we had an amazing internal introvert moment, introspective moment, when we were talking about what type of films would we make if, on behalf of Shutterstock, knowing that we've done so much already within the space. So, and looking at Miles as an example of someone that isn't particularly, of course, from our archive, but he's part of the family. He's an amazing story. He's an amazing character, and he's obviously amazing on camera. And he's an amazingly talented person as well. And it's not a bad thing that he has a few million people following on social media as well, of course. So through that, we're able to plug into lots of different types of formats and stories and be very proactive, probably quicker than anyone, I'd say.
And also, just jumping onto that, one of the interesting things that has come out of this is Shutterstock has a couple of million customers globally. They submit images and footage and powerful things from all over the world, and we license that. And filmmakers buy it, documentary filmmakers buy it, brands buy it, agencies buy it. But since we launched the programming division and Aidan launched it, the outreach from people in countries you would never consist contacting, saying, hey, I've got a story I want to tell. There's something really interesting happening right here in Turkey right now, and we want to tell it. We're in a position with the global production company right now to be able, here's a camera, let's go. What's the story? And that is really interesting because the generations now that are consuming are wanting to learn about cultures and trends and people in different walks of lives more than ever, okay? We've become a global community that acts locally, and all of a sudden, it doesn't matter where you live, the stories seem to be the same, and about people and how people think and how people perceive things. And I think that's what's exciting. And it leans kind of back into, I'm going to bring it up again, where you guys came from. So, you know, I think what's really interesting is these guys were at Vice as it was beginning and kicking out all those crazy stories that you'd see. You know, it's just like a fur maker in Iceland, Reykjavik. I mean, who does a show on that? But Vice did. And, you know, so Aidan, tell me about that, because you guys were there and now you're back together in a way. And, you know, what's it like? You know, what's the change?
Yeah, that's such a big question. Like we can all comment on this, so please do back me up. But there was a moment like 10 or 15 years ago at Vice that was a really amazing inflection point within the company. That was a magazine. It was a digital magazine, and Spike Jonze. It's okay to name drop Spike Jonze. If you can name drop Spike Jonze, you name drop Spike Jonze. So he went up to the editorial teams and said, "You're all writing such amazing stories about amazing people. Can you just do me a favor, take a camera and go and shoot it?" And then overnight, this brand of documentary, Vice-style documentary filmmaking exploded. It really resonated with millennials. Millennials, we as a generation have an amazingly sharp bullshit detector. We fucking hate stuff that's fake. We hate stuff that's set up. And then it was, so and then the millennials started to really, I think, love the deep dive into certain subjects, and so we would just take a camera and go and film it and start, and it was that quick, you know, and it exploded. But team, tell, you know, your experience as well in through that process. Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's kind of interesting now is that we're talking about this, you know, like this wave that, you know, it seems like is coming, but you know, for us, I think a lot of it feels like we kind of were part of that wave when it was beginning, right? We you know, we can catch it at the peak because we were there when it started, because we understood from the beginning that like there's this notion, I mean, especially this notion like 5 years ago that young people wouldn't watch anything longer than 60 seconds long. And that was like the dumbest thing I've ever heard, right? It's like kids will watch a Twitch stream for 3 hours if it's something that they find is interesting. Like, you're just not making something interesting for them. And that was something that was like we got to figure out so quickly that we could put 15-minute documentaries on YouTube when no one was putting anything there longer than 2 minutes, and it was getting consumed at incredibly high rates by young people because we were making stuff that was interesting to them, that had music that they didn't hate, that had, just like a style and a tone that was something that they could kind of see and vibe with. And I think that was a major shift. And I think now, like, it's still, people are still coming around to that. There's still this thought that, like, documentaries can't, be targeted at young people and still resonate to a wider audience. And it's crazy. Like, it's been proven over and over again. And, like, that's, I think, where a lot of documentary storytelling needs to shift, that it's like, it's okay to make something that a young person likes, and you won't alienate a 60-year-old person either. You're just going to make it cooler. Like, you're just going to make it better. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see with the style of filmmaking and filmmakers they are, the team here shows up so open to any type of external influence, creative influence, cultural influence, artistic, whatever type of influence it is. And so rather than coming to set with a very set approach to the creative, the shot list, everyone's got to stick within these guardrails, having the freedom to let things play out, I think it's been the exact same style that we embrace for branded entertainment as well, and that's really effective. So, but yeah, this is the team that kind of designed that, and especially on the sports stuff at Vice was so cool, so cutting edge, and on the talk about going against again the kind of counter story, right? Then like where you were going and the stories you were covering.
Yeah, yeah, I got to go all over the place and do a lot of interesting things. I got tear gassed in Serbia, and I slept on top of a volcano in the Congo and did all sorts of wild stuff, and it was incredible. But also, I think there was that realization that, okay, you can go and do the nuttiest thing in the world in Serbia and be in a soccer riot, or you can also go there and just like tell a story about a really interesting soccer fan. And that was something that no one was doing at the time. And you're going to get, just like, nations and nations and people watching this. And that goes back to that conversation about making content that can be seen globally. Make it really interesting. Like, you can dig into a subculture in a way that is so deep. But if you're doing something that is, if someone is talking about their passions, if they're a great character, it'll resonate globally. It'll resonate everywhere. And I think that's always kind of been the focus and the point.
I think also in my experience at Vice, what was especially interesting about the collaboration process within the building was that we were watching each other's edits, and like different teams were talking about projects. So, someone might edit something and maybe the edit was like sometimes like not okay. Like maybe there were some scenes in there that shouldn't be in there. And someone from another team would be like, I watched this edit and like I have really amazing constructive feedback for you. But it sort of created this space where we were looking out for each other and also looking out for the people that we were featuring. Like, it was always very important to me to honor and respect everyone that we put into our films. And that was a really good learning experience for me as a filmmaker, just to like check in with other people and make sure that whoever I'm shooting, I'm honoring at the same time.
And that's just totally refreshing, because that's what you guys are bringing today, that openness. I come from a world where talent and cast, it was always a clause from the agents, meaningful input. And, which meant nothing, which means you had zero input. So today, it's great to see that that's changing. But, as well, one question I do want to just come back to here is back to Miles, because one of the things that, is driving a lot of the stories, and I know we're heavily influenced by here at Shutterstock, trends across TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, all these platforms, social platforms, is stories are coming out of those. Trends emerge, and it's like, okay, there could be something here that we could lean into, and we could develop something for. I've always been fascinated with the fact that social media and celebrity, 10 years ago, celebrities not really had a platform, okay? And the celebrity photographer was king. That was the person who made the story, okay? I'm asking Miles this question right now because I think it's an interesting one. When you look at people like Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton, Megan Fox, and all these people, Rihanna, they have social platforms which reach millions and millions and millions of people every day. They can post a picture, they can tell stories, okay? Why are you still important today? I asked that question to him earlier today, and I think it's a great question, because these celebrities have their own platforms, their own publicists, their own photographers following them around. Why are you still important?
Well, I think that kind of following up on what Aiden said is the younger generation is really getting a big BS meter. I think that since the beginning of my career, at least, the growth of social media has been huge. And it's a blessing and a curse in some sense, because viewers are getting, a closer look into these celebrities' lives and expecting to just have that kind of access. And on the other hand, celebrities are getting this platform where they can hand deliver this manicured image to, the audience. But at the same time, the audience and the consumers are sort of rebelling against these perfect images, and they'd rather see their favorite stars with the masks off. People want to see that real side, and that sort of leaves the door open for me as a photographer and as a vessel to bring the content to the viewers who are kind of craving this authenticity. You were saying that people have a huge platform of their own, but those hundreds of millions of followers that they do have are following them with the intent of seeing their content. And on the other hand, as a celebrity, you'd want somebody like me as a photographer who has the reach of media outlets around the world, because they want to grow their audience to people that aren't following them. So that's who we're reaching.
That's interesting. So, as we move forward from this, what I want to do right now is open it up to some Q&A with the audience. So we're going to do that right now. So we've got about 5 minutes. I don't know, where's Shui? How long we got? 10 minutes. Perfect. Okay, so let's open this up to some Q&A. And who's got a question?
Yes, mate. Nicely done.
What made you all personally, as filmmakers, gravitate towards documentary filmmaking over other forms of storytelling?
I could jump in there. I think just building off of what Miles was saying around social media, I don't think it's a coincidence that the popularity of documentary filmmaking and consumption has risen alongside social media. We're in an era right now where almost anyone can say anything, and it can reach a certain amount of people just through your feed. But one of the things about social media is it is very, very hard to tell what's true and what's not. It is very, very easy to lie in a social post. In documentary film, on the other hand, it is almost impossible to lie. If you're creating a great documentary, it has to be true. And there's something very, very powerful about this format in this moment when there is so much noise and so much ability to just kind of put whatever version of a story you want out there. This is a format that requires you to really go in, really get to know the characters, get real authentic access, and tell the story in a way that, once the story is out there with that level of depth, people are going to believe it, and it's going to stand up. It's going to hold up. So I think we're just getting started in terms of people really understanding the power of documentary filmmaking in a world where, content is so widely available of different formats.
I also want to add something to that. I completely agree with you, John. I think that there's, well, first of all, so many interesting stories around us all the time. And I believe that anyone can tell an interesting story, and that your perspective is important and exciting, and it's about vulnerability. So for me, documentary filmmaking provides space for vulnerability. If you want to be vulnerable, you can. And that resonates with an audience, just be honest and try to be yourself when you're telling your story.
My question is, at least my personal feelings about documentary are that even though it's about the truth and objectivity, truth is always subjective, and you're always coming at a story through your own point of view, which is totally fine. It's just like being an individual human. How do you all approach kind of either acknowledging or removing your bias from your individual perspectives when you're filming people from both other communities or of other mindsets and ideologies, and not impose your own biased perspective or thought, whatever, onto them in these objective-ish portrayals of truth that you're looking for?
I don't think you can remove your bias. I think what I try to do is acknowledge it, and like it's always going to be there. For when I'm working on my own project, I'm actually playing with that bias, and I'm like showing that like reality is whatever I want it to be. I could edit a film a million different ways, and you could leave the room feeling like very many different truths from that, you know? I think when I'm featuring other people, it's really important to spend time trying my best to get to know who they are and identifying which of my biases might fuck up their story, you know? So that's the only way I could really answer that. Maybe you have.
No, I agree. I think it goes back to what you were talking about with the collaboration, like, right? Like I think the environment that we all grew up in as filmmakers, which was great, was being able to share what you're making with so many different people and get their viewpoints on it, and then just check yourself. Like, just always knowing that, you know, there are 1,000 ways I can mess something up. And I think that like knowing that is liberating in a way, you know, like knowing that, okay, like here's a place where I got it wrong, and being open to that is like tremendous. And just being able to like, honestly, like it's why I love also making films like with a duo, right? Like having someone that we do it on set, like on the fly, like ask each other, like, is this right? Is this wrong? How, you know, like, and I think that is so helpful, just to be able to have those kind of checks and balances. And in the right, like filmmaking process, you're getting that all throughout the way. You know, it's like that's, if everyone is on and everything is good, then it's really helpful. And then, you know, obviously at the end of the day, I think you're totally right that your subjective point of view is going to come out, but I think it shapes it, and it kind of makes sure that you're setting on the trajectory that you were when you started, and that you agreed upon with your subjects, and that everything that started there is still going in the way that it was supposed to.
So in fiction, it's super easy to, I guess, be authentic to yourself, because this is coming from yourself, and so you can tell the story however you want. But a lot of times in documentary, you're focusing on other people, whether it's groups or a person. So how as a storyteller and filmmaker can we make sure to remain authentic to the story without trying to impose too many ideas of how we think things should be?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's diving into that subject and understanding them as much as you possibly can. You know, like that's something that Keenan talked about. And like, you know, there are times too where it's like, you know, those conversations leading into a project of like, why are you doing this? Who are you doing it with? Having conversations with those subjects and telling them too, like your perspective going in, and then making sure that, you know, that you understand why they want to make it, you understand why you want to make it, and also having like the courage to sometimes be like, okay, this is not the right project for me. I think that's super important to also know sometimes where it's like, you know, those conversations, you know, we're having about, you know, being in a riot in Serbia. It's like, at what point am I platforming people who are just saying and doing awful things? At what point is it important for the world? And at what point is it something that I just disagree with so much that I just shouldn't be making it? And I think that's something that everyone you kind of have to come to terms with. You have to have those conversations going in. And then once you figure out, you know, what is the authentic story to this person? What is the story that I want to tell? And making sure that there's some way for that to line up.
Yeah, I would just add, I think like one thing you learn more and more as you go is that, you know, what happens off camera is often as important to the story as what you capture on camera. And it goes into a lot of what Dan is saying about making it a genuine collaboration with the folks whose story you are telling, so that their perspective is accurately represented, and it's not just, you know, your gaze on their life. And that comes with, you know, really spending time with them, really establishing a rapport with them, really developing empathy on both sides, so that what you do put on camera is a result of a genuine, like, authentic connection between the subject and the person behind the camera, versus just, you know, a kind of superficial look at their life from the lens of your camera.
Also, just try to be sensitive and empathetic. So, you know, we're always going to project ideas of who people are, what we want the story to be. Try to like make space in your plans to evolve and learn from your subject as you're making the film, you know? So it's a conversation, and you can both grow throughout the process.
I have a question here. I feel like at at its core, every creative endeavor starts as an idea, as a conversation, as a belief that there's something there. There's a point at which you all of us as filmmakers need to commit to that idea and move it into production and really believe that there's something there. And Keenan, I think with your film, you know, clearly you came up with an idea that is so unique and does break the mold of, you know, standard format and such. And I'm just wondering for each of you, you know, your process of taking an idea, building the confidence that even though it might not fit into the silo of what is normal or effective, you know, your process of believing in yourself and your story enough to take that risk and approach something in a way that is distinct and that there's no way to really guarantee will have a good outcome.
I'm trying to well, thank you, first of all. I'm trying to understand the question a little better.
Your transition from this is my idea to this is what I'm going to do in a unique way.
Okay. So I guess my transition was first, this is my idea because it was something that I feel like I'm supposed to do in my life, you know, as an adopted person, and then I'm a filmmaker, so everyone's telling me like, well, you should tell your own story. So I'm like, okay, I'll tell my own story. And then as I started the process, my goal was for it to be cathartic. So that was the first thing. And then I'm like a playful person and I don't want to be too self-serious. So honestly, when I started the process, I thought it was going to be like really funny, like very funny. And it's kind of like awkward and sad and uncomfortable. And that's just like the truth that came out in it, you know? So I guess for me, I figured out what the format was every day was sort of changing and evolving as my feelings towards myself and the subject were changing and evolving. And I really don't want it to feel like I'm navel gazing at all. So that's another thing. I show people who don't know me that well, and I'm like, is this good or is this just like me taking a selfie, you know? So I hope that answers your question. Okay, cool.
This is a question for Miles. How do you balance, like we were talking about earlier, how the millennials have a BS meter. How do you balance staying authentic to yourself and your work versus maybe the demands that a celebrity might have that may be inauthentic? Like when you shoot a rather staged candid where they might want to look a certain way and that's not exactly what the scene calls for. I mean, how do you balance that within yourself?
That's a great question, thank you. I would say that if it's not for me, like if I'm in a situation where there's too much red tape, I remove myself. A lot of the time I choose not to work with publicists and PR where there's, you know, different lines of communication all to get to an end result. And for me, it's just not worth it. I'd rather establish a real connection with somebody that I'm working with so that I can, you know, joke around with them and have a real relationship so that when we are shooting or you know, we have a goal in mind, it's easier to manipulate, you know? I think that for me doing this, it's fighting back against bias, just because there's so much misconception about what I do, and showing it, you know, in real time is important to me, and that's why I'm doing this.
It's going to be so weird when you start getting photographed by paparazzi photographers.
You know, it's funny, I actually do get followed around quite frequently in LA.
Getting meta.
So, well, any more questions before we wrap?
I have a quick one, if that's all right. I guess this is for Keenan, but everybody too. How do you kind of work through intimacy and intimate moments with honesty, and like how do you welcome other people into that space? A lot of times when it's really private.
It's challenging for sure, but one of the things that I like to do is like set up my camera and like let it run for hours. So like I'll just like keep it on and I'll like make phone calls and I'll just like read out loud from my diary. And in the beginning, it's like not good to watch any of that. And I didn't put it in the movie, don't worry. But then later on, I feel like I sort of forget that the camera's there. And then I'm focused more on the process of like getting an answer. Like if I'm looking for clues, then I'm looking for clues. I'm not thinking about how I look or present myself looking for clues. And in terms of inviting other people in to my intimacy, I guess it again is playful and inquisitive And I feel lonely in this process, so I'm kind of desperately asking other people to participate in this with me. And I think that that maybe comes through, or I hope it does.
I definitely have something to say along those lines too. For me, it's really hard because I am, an intimate situation would be working directly with somebody for, a setup or a staged candid moment. And capturing that on film is really hard because you're working with, people's reputations, and there's this misconception that, you can't do, paparazzi shoots that you have some sort of control over as well. So it's a line that's really hard to walk across, but I think what we've got so far is really incredible and tells the story well.
And I think in both of these, right, a lot of it is time. Like a lot of it is just putting the time in, right? It's like having that, we made a show with 17-year-old boys who are, usually not the most emotionally vulnerable all the time, right? And like that's changing, and I think that's amazing. But I think that's one of those things too, where in the beginning, the first like 2 weeks that we shot, we got one-word answers of like, yeah, it's cool, like I'm good, And then like by the end of the season, you're working together, you're sharing moments, you're sharing all these times, you're sharing times and the camera's not even on. And then by the end of it, it's like, you're in people's living rooms, they're crying while they're telling you about their hopes and dreams, and you're actually experiencing something. And then by the end of it too, it's like, having those conversations too, where they want that to be out. They're happy that it is going out. And I think that's part of it too, is having the trust back and forth, that you're not just going to take this and flip it into something that it's not. You're going to tell their whole story.
And by the way, I'll give Dan all the credit for this. He spent 5-6 years developing a relationship with the coach before we started filming. And it takes that type of commitment sometimes if you really want that vulnerability that makes for a great story. And sometimes, timing is really important. You can't rush into a very vulnerable story. You have to create the conditions where everybody really wants to share, whether that's spending 6 years talking to the Uncut Gems guy every weekend, or spending a bunch of time with a 17-year-old until he kind of forgets you're there.
Are we good? Okay. No more questions? All right. Well, firstly, I just want to thank this panel. I think this is outstanding. I think you guys are awesome. So if we can just clap. And I just want to say thank you. And I just want to also say that I've been moderating. I was talking about these guys earlier. I've been doing this for 20 years, moderating panels, variety, everything. And I can honestly say, putting this panel together as we did and learning about each other and their work and their approach, and I know their backgrounds, but how they're facing this is a complete change. And it's really refreshing for somebody like me, who comes from the old school world, okay? I come from UTA, so done a lot of that work. So I've come through that machine, and it's so refreshing to see that these people can do this. But more importantly, I call it safe space that you create. You spend the time, you put the time in with the people that you work with, and it creates a safe space of trust. And that's when the authenticity starts to come out. And I think that that's something that I'm so excited to see what's coming out over the next, the rest of this year and years to come. But it's not just here, it's happening everywhere. It's happening in kids' bedrooms right now are making documentaries, okay? They're writing journals. They're keeping notes. They're trying to figure out ways how to be cool. They're trying to figure out ways to be fit in. But you know what? The documentaries that are being made today about life and about emotion and about vulnerability are helping, okay? So for you guys, and I see a bunch of young kids out here, if you're making documentary, listen, you've got an opportunity right now to tell stories to millions of people, okay? But you just got to follow the new way of working. Don't try and go backwards. Go forwards. All right? Okay, with that said, thank you.